Hey guys, Pastor Kevin. Hope you're doing well. Hope you're feeling well. Thanks for being here today as we continue this house church thing that we're trying out in the middle of this craziness. And I want to thank you. So many of you have reached out to me asking how I'm doing, how my family's doing. We're doing fine. And this week I spent a lot of time reaching out to a lot of you and just seeing how you're doing. And I love this connectivity. I love that we're staying in touch and keeping up with one another during this time. And some of you have been really funny as I've asked how you're doing, and people will say, oh, I'm fine. My commute time's gotten a lot better. And I asked one person, I said, so your commute time's better? I said, yeah, it makes sense. Not a lot of cars on the road. And they were like, no, I literally roll out of bed and my commute time is from my bed to my computer. That's my commute time now. And other people have told me, yeah, it's great. I'm getting 10 hours of sleep a night just so I can wake up and have a full day of hand washing and staring out of windows. So that's the world we live in, but I appreciate you guys being connected. And what's fascinating though, is as I ask the question of people, how are you doing? You can almost feel people actually thinking about it. I mean, normally we're asked how are you doing on a day-to-day basis, and we just skip right through the question, right? We have a pat answer of, I'm fine, I'm good, I'm well, if you're one of those highly educated people. But we skip right through the answer. We don't really think about it too hard. And it's interesting because as I ask people, how are you doing? It's like we all kind of take inventory for a second. We're like, yeah, how am I doing? Like, how am I really doing? Because if we're being honest, right now, there's a lot of worry. There's a lot of burdens. There's a lot of stress. There's a lot of anxiety all around us. And I want to just take a second today and just pause and focus on a verse that's very famous. It's a simple passage that Jesus says in Matthew chapter 11. And he says these words just very simply. But he says, come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Now just pause for just a second. Let me say that just one more time and just let it wash over you a little bit. He says, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. We've been in this Lent series just looking at Lent, the idea of giving something up so we can gain something greater. And today we're going to kind of wrap that up before we go into Palm Sunday and into Easter. And today I want us to just challenge ourselves to kind of look at a couple different things that we can give up so we can gain something greater. And I would argue that one of the things we have to give up is our own lifestyle. Some of the things that we're usually doing, some of the ways we're used to living, the ways we're used to existing, the rhythms, the patterns, the habits that we've fallen into, there are some of those that we're going to have to give up so that we can gain something greater, this life of peace, this life of joy, this life of rest that Jesus promises us. And so I want to back up real quick and look at this verse in context, because really when Jesus says this verse, he's on a roll. Like he is on a hot streak of preaching. And I love where he's going with this. So if you have a Bible or a phone, or if you want to just follow along on the screen behind me, we're going to go backwards just a little bit before we come back to this verse. And we'll look at the context in which it's set, because Jesus is teaching on a deep level about this idea of coming to him with our burdens so that he can give us rest. He says this in verse 16. If we go back, he says, to what can I compare this generation, this group of people, this world around us? What can I compare them to? They are like children sitting in the marketplaces and calling out to others, saying, we played a flute for you and you did not dance. We sang a dirge and you did not mourn. What he's saying here is he's saying you're like kids that just don't get it. I'm handing you this new life and this new lifestyle on a silver platter, yet you're not willing to take it. You just don't get it. You don't understand what's right in front of you. I had a time where I was working with young adults at a church, and we had a guy that went to our church who was a professional golfer. And so as part of his deal as a professional golfer, he had a card that got him unlimited amounts of Outback Steakhouse food, like unlimited. He could go there and he could order anything on the menu as much as he wanted, and all of it, 100% was comped. It was completely free. And so he told me, he said, Kevin, I don't really use this card very often. I don't go to Outback that much. So why don't you get your friends together and you guys go there? You take the young adults there. You all hang out there. And so I got a bunch of young adults together and I said, let's all go eat free Outback. And when you tell young people they can eat free steaks, like they'll all show up. It's just magical. And so they were all showing up. Everybody was hanging out together. And we were standing outside the restaurant because there were so many of us. And we were all promised this free Outback food, as much as we wanted for free. And while we're standing there, one of the young men looked at me and he was like, man, I'm real hungry right now. And I was like, yeah, but it shouldn't be much longer. We'll go in just a second. And he's like, yeah, but I'm hungry like right now. So I think I'm just going to run over next door and grab some food. And I looked next door and it was a McDonald's, guys. Like it was like a McDonald's. He's like, yeah, I'm just going to run in and grab a couple double cheeseburgers and then I'll come back and meet you for dinner. And he went and left the line for free steaks at Outback and went and paid for McDonald's food. And what Jesus is saying is, I'm offering you this life and this lifestyle of peace, of joy, of freedom, of this rest that I'm promising you, yet you're not willing to take it because you're so busy off buying and paying for, not just now, but later, McDonald's food. And I'm offering you this free, good stuff that you're going to enjoy, but you just don't understand it. You just won't take it. And so he goes on and he says, for John, talking about John the Baptist, came neither eating nor drinking, yet they say he has a demon. So he's talking about John the Baptist, his cousin, who was a forerunner prophet of Jesus. He came before Jesus, started talking about Jesus. But John was a harsh and very severe, very prudent man. John didn't eat anything, as he says. John was eating locusts and honey. He was like a vegan before veganism was cool. And so he was this strict man. And so he says, he came and he didn't do anything with you. And you thought he had a demon. So then he says, by contrast, he says, the Son of Man, talking about himself, Jesus calls himself the Son of Man a lot. The Son of Man came eating and drinking, and they say, here's a glutton and a drunkard and a friend of tax collectors and sinners. And Jesus is saying, I came and I was very kind, and I was like very friendly. I was very compassionate. I showed up and I hung out with you. And then what you did with me is you started singing songs about me. And this phrase that says, here is a glutton and a drunkard and a friend of tax collectors and sinners, that actually became like a song, like a jingle that they sang about Jesus. It was his own little theme song that people sung about him. And he says, I tried to be the opposite of John, and you still didn't like it. Nothing's going to make you happy here. He says, you just don't understand what we're offering. You don't understand what I'm bringing to you, what I'm trying to give to you, this life and this lifestyle of peace and of joy and of rest. And so from there, he starts to call people out. So he says, but wisdom is proved right by her actions. And then in verse 20, it says, then Jesus began to denounce the cities in which most of his miracles had been performed because they did not repent. So he goes to the cities, he starts listing them off. These are the cities that he had done a lot of miracles in, where they had seen him face to face, person to person. They had seen him in action, and they still didn't really believe. They didn't get it. And it says that he calls them out. He says, woe to you, Chorazin. Woe to you, Bethsaida. If the miracles that have been performed in you had been performed in Tyre and in Sidon, they would have repented long ago in sackcloth and in ashes. So he's saying, you guys who were up close to the action, you guys who were right there as I was doing this, Bethsaida, we see quite a bit that Jesus did a lot of miracles there. Chorazin was another city where Jesus spent a lot of time. And these are the places that felt as though they were closest to Jesus. He's saying, like, if I would have done the things here in Tyre or in Sidon, which were like pagan places. And what he's saying is Chorazin or Bethsaida, they would have been like the Bible Belt, and Tyre or Sidon, they would have been more like a Vegas type place. And he's saying, you guys here in the Bible Belt, you've seen a lot and you've thought you were close to me. But if I would have done those same things in Vegas, they would have repented right away. Because you guys think you're so close and you fooled yourself into thinking that we have a real relationship. And he goes on from there and he says, and you, Capernaum, you will be lifted up to the skies, question mark. Now, this is an interesting phrase because Capernaum was a city where Jesus spent most of his time. It was a home turf for Jesus. And Capernaum became so accustomed to what Jesus was doing. They became so enamored with who they were because they were close to Jesus, because they thought they were near Jesus, that what they did was they actually were going to change their town slogan to be called the city that is close to heaven or near heaven. Kind of this lifted up to the skies. They were going to be called this city that was either lifted to heaven or close to heaven because they thought we're so close to Jesus. Jesus is so near us. He's like all the time he's around here. And it's changed our minds. It's changed our city. The problem is it hadn't changed their hearts. And if you're like me, if you grew up in this thing of Christianity, if you grew up in the church and you've been around this for a long time, this is a wake-up call for people like you and I. Jesus is saying, just because you've been close to me for a long time, and you have the slogans, you have the sayings, you know all the right answers, you know all the right words, that doesn't mean that you've actually changed your heart. I mean, let's face it, you and I right now, we might be able to say all the right phrases, that we should choose faith over fear, that we should just let go and let God. We might be able to say all the right words right now, but the truth is it hasn't changed our hearts. And we are still just as worried. We're just as burdened. We're just as weary as everyone else. We're no different. And he's saying, just because you think you have the right words, you think you have the right slogans, you have all the right bumper stickers and the right t-shirts, it doesn't mean that you're any closer to the heart of God. And so he goes from there. He says, no, you will go down to the depths. If the miracles that were performed in you had been performed in Sodom, which is like the worst of all cities in the whole Bible, it would have remained to this day. But I tell you that it will be more bearable for Sodom on the day of judgment than for you. So who is this all for? If it's not for the religious, if it's not for the people who have been closest in proximity to Jesus, who is Jesus' target market? Who's Jesus here for? And in verse 28, he tells us, because he says, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Jesus' market is those who are weary and burdened, but those who will at least admit that they are. Those who will be honest with themselves and with him and admit that they are weary and they are burdened. He didn't come here for those who are going to act like they have it all together. He didn't come here for the people who have all the right slogans and sayings. He came here for those who are weary and burdened. And what he promises is that he will give us rest. And he tells us how in the next couple verses. He says, take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. So the word yoke here has two meanings. And we'll start with the first one here because every rabbi would have had a yoke. A yoke was simply the way a rabbi would live their life, how they would live their lifestyle. Every rabbi's job was to go and learn the first 5 books of the Bible. They would memorize, literally commit to memory, all 5 of the first 5 books of the Bible. They were called the Talmud or the Pentateuch. They would memorize these. I mean, imagine memorizing like the entire book of Leviticus. They would put it all to memory, but then they wouldn't just make it head knowledge. They would live it out in their daily lives. They would make it part of their routines and their rituals and their patterns and their rhythms. Their lifestyle would look just like how they read those first 5 books of the Bible. They would take those and apply them to their lives. And so they would take these things, and it was really twofold. It was kind of an idea of, first of all, how do you live the life that you're in? What are the things that life is putting on you? How do you shoulder life itself? How do you handle worry and stress and anxiety? How do you handle the things that life is putting on you? But secondly, how do you handle the things that the Lord has put on you? How do you handle those things that the Lord has made happen? What do you see with those scriptures, and how do you apply what the Lord has put on you into your life? And today, really, we all have a yoke too. We all live in certain patterns and rhythms and rituals and routines. We all do it too. It's no different. I mean, your life is lived a certain way. When it comes to hurry or worry or anxiety or stress or concerns, you're going to act a certain way. You're going to live those out a certain way. What are the things life has put on you? How are you going to live in the midst of those? But the second is, what are the things that you feel that your Lord has put on you? And let me back up and just say that your Lord might not be Jesus. What if your Lord is your career? How do you handle the things that your Lord has put on you? What if your Lord is the relationship you're in right now? How do you handle the things your Lord has put on you? What if your Lord is your wealth? How do you live out? How do you handle the things that your Lord has put on you? How are you shouldering that load? Because Jesus tells us that if He's our Lord, that our load will look very different. He says, "Take my yoke up on you and learn from me." And if you learn from me, here's what you're going to find is that I'm gentle, I'm humble in heart, and in me you'll find rest, actual rest for your souls. See, the yoke is a lifestyle. It's a way of living. It's living a lifestyle, not just a life, but a lifestyle day in and day out. And here's the thing. I think many of us, we want the life without the lifestyle that comes with it. When I was in high school, I had a very good friend who was a few years older than me, and he was a beast of a man. He was like a full man while the rest of us were boys, and we played football together, and he would just run people over, and he would bench press like a house, and he was just so big and so strong. It became apparent he was going to become an NFL player, and so he went to college and worked out like crazy in college and got bigger and stronger. I remember him coming back to the high school and not being able to fit through doorways because he was just so big. He had to turn sideways to get through a doorway. He was so big. And then he got drafted into the NFL. He started playing with championship teams, making a ton of money. He became very famous, very well known. To this day, he's a very well known guy. And when I saw his life, when I saw the way his life was, I was like, man, I want that life. Like, he's making a ton of money. He's ripped. He's a beast of a man. He's got respect. He's got wealth. He's got power. Like, I want that life. I want to do what he's doing. But then I realized that to get his life, I had to live his lifestyle. To accept his life, I had to accept his lifestyle. And his lifestyle revolved around him waking up every morning and working out for 4 hours, and then going to sleep for about 3 hours, and then waking up again and working out for 4 hours, and then going to sleep for 3 hours, and then waking up and working out for 4 hours, and then going to sleep for 3 hours. And he would be on a 24-hour cycle of working out for 4 hours, sleeping for 3 hours, working out for 4 hours, sleeping for 3 hours, working out for 4 hours. He had a strict diet. He had a strict routine. He was constantly working and achieving. He was doing amazing things. But when I looked at it, to be honest with you, I wanted the life, but I did not want that lifestyle. I think many of us see Jesus the same way. We want the life that Jesus offers us, but we don't want the lifestyle that comes with it. We want him to give us this new life, but we don't want to change our lifestyle. And the truth is, you cannot attain this life of Jesus, this life of peace and joy and rest, without attaining the lifestyle, the rhythms and the patterns and the rituals and the routines and the habits that Jesus had. If we don't attain those things, we'll never get the life that Jesus offers. It's a both and, it's not an either or. And we want this life, but we have to take the lifestyle that comes with it. And if we're honest, many of us want the life that Jesus offers, but our lifestyle looks no different than anyone else's. I mean, the things you watched last night on your laptop, on your TV, do those look like things that would be a part of the rhythms and the patterns, the habits of Jesus? The way that you're in relationships right now with the person you're dating or the person that you're just with, even your marriage, does it look like the rhythms and the patterns and the routines of Jesus? Your career right now, the way that you're handling your money or your influence or your power or your esteem or your reputation, do those things look like the rhythms and the patterns of Jesus? Does your lifestyle look like the lifestyle of Jesus, or do you just want the life of Jesus without attaining the lifestyle of Jesus? And then we see Jesus use this yoke word one more time as he finishes this passage where he says, "For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Yoke, again, has one term that we see with the rabbis, but it still has another term that we see in farm equipment. And we see it as something that would go around oxen or around cattle as they would pull carts or pull equipment behind them. And it's something that would shackle them together, and they would work in tandem so that they could pull together at the same times, and they would pull things and work in unison with one another. And what we see here is Jesus doesn't offer us escape from worry or burdens or being weary. What he offers us is equipment on how to deal with it in the midst of it. He offers us equipment that lets us walk in step with him. After we got done with Sunday service last week, I had time and I was home. And so I took my kids out into the front yard, and I decided that this would be social distancing from everybody else if we learned to ride some bikes. We had some friends who gave our kids bikes, which was really sweet. And so they got on these big kid bikes and they were wanting to ride them. And so I was ready to be that dad who just runs up and down the street. And I hold the back of the bike and I hold the handlebars, and I was helping them get their balance and hoping that they just wouldn't fall and crash and burn. And so we're running up and down the street, and I'm holding onto the bike, I'm holding on to the back of the bike, we're running together, and they're pulling back, and I'm trying to hold them up, or they're pushing ahead trying to get so fast that I'm trying to hold them up, or they're now leaning on me or leaning away from me, and I'm trying to hold them in place as they keep moving around. I'm getting exhausted just trying to hold them up as they keep leaning side to side or rushing forward or holding back. And after we got done that night, I came inside the house and I was just sitting down here in our living room, and I started to feel this like intense pain in my chest, like something I've never felt before. I mean, it hurt so bad. It was right here in the middle of my chest. I could just feel this pain that would not go away. And as I moved, it got more and more intense. So as I was putting the kids to bed, I was trying to read with them. Anything I did was just hurting so bad. And my shoulders started to get sore, and my chest was hurting just incredibly, something I've literally never experienced before. It was so bad that I actually, about 10 o'clock, ended up calling one of our good friends who is a nurse. I asked her, I said, I've got this pain in my chest and I don't know what's going on. Should I be worried? Should I be going to the emergency room? And she was like, well, just the fact that you're calling me does make me nervous. She said, it doesn't sound like anything serious, but just the fact that you're calling me makes me a little bit concerned that maybe this is serious. And I was like, maybe it is. Maybe this is more intense than I thought. And I'm starting to think I'm having chest pains. What's happening to me? And so I called the on-call doctor through our insurance, and he started asking a bunch of questions. He looked through my charts that they had online, and he said, with your age and your history and your health, it doesn't look like this should be a big issue. I don't think it's your heart. But he said, I don't know what it is. All I knew is I was still in an enormous amount of pain. Like I was still hurting so badly. So I called another friend who's a doctor, who's a chiropractor, and I called Raul. I said, hey, man, I don't know what's happening, but something bad is going on in my chest. Should I be going to an emergency room? Is this really serious? And he was like, I don't think so. But again, it sounds like it's a really serious amount of pain. Why don't you come over? So I went to his house and I sat down in a chair kind of like this, and he felt my chest, and he just felt right here. And he said, oh, Kevin, you've got a rib that's come out of place. Like your rib has slid out of the location it's supposed to be in. And I asked him, what do I do about that? And he's like, well, we're going to have to put it back in place. And so I was hoping that there would be a nice, easy process to do this. It turns out he took me into his garage, he laid me on a table, and he adjusted my back. And so adjusting my back, he popped my rib back into place. And guys, I might have thought words that pastors shouldn't be thinking, because it hurt real bad. And I guess every rib has nerves around it, and so the nerve was being moved or pinched, and so everything inside of me just went like black, and I saw spots, and it hurt so bad, and I have never felt that much pain. And so what I realized is that I was in a lot of pain because as I was helping my kids, we weren't moving in sync together. There were moments where they were pulling ahead of me and it was pulling me forward. There were moments where they were pulling behind me and it was pulling me backwards. And as I would move, it would pull things out of sync. And I was in so much pain because I wasn't moving in sync with them. I had gone through so much worry and so much anxiety in my own life because I wasn't moving at the same speed they were moving. They were back, they were forward, they were to the side. They weren't moving with me and I wasn't moving with them. Because we weren't pulling at the same pace, I was in a lot of pain. I was experiencing a lot of worry. I was under an extreme amount of anxiety. I say all this because this picture of the yoke that Jesus paints for us, it shows us being in step with him. It shows that we are yoked with him, that we are moving in stride with Jesus. That he's pulling the weight that we can't pull, and at moments we're maybe trying to go too far ahead or we're staying too far behind, but we're not walking in pace with Jesus. He's saying, if you'll get in step with me, if your rhythm and your pattern and your routine and just every step you take, if it looks like mine, if it's at the same pace and the same stride that I walk every day in, then you're going to find rest. You're going to find peace. And right now, I think a lot of us, because of the situation we're in, we're either way behind where Jesus is at and we're a hurried, worried mess back here, or we're way ahead of him because we're so anxious and so timid and so scared that we've moved way out in front of him. And the reality is he wants us to be walking right in step with him. Not just the life he offers, but the lifestyle he's offering us would be lived in step with him. That not just the religion we know, but the relationship we have with him would be lived in step with him. And that if we live in step with him, that he will bring rest for our souls. So today, I don't know where you're at. I don't know what your life feels like. I would imagine that for every one of us, there's an amount of worry. There's an amount of burden. There's an amount of weariness. And my only hope for each one of us is not that there's some other way through this, but that the best thing we can do is walk in step in the life and the lifestyle that Jesus offers, in the yoke that only he can give us to walk in step with him during this time and in all days to come. That we would walk stride for stride with our Savior. Jesus, I thank you for this time. I thank you that we could gather together, even online. I thank you for your word and your words and the things that you teach us. We're sorry for the times that we've let religion become a replacement for you. We're sorry for the times we've wanted the life you offer without adapting to the lifestyle that you offer us. And we're sorry for the times where we've pulled ahead or we've stayed too far behind from walking in step, in relationship, and in a yoke with you. I pray today that you would be with each one of us, with our families, with the people around us, as we seek to become people who are less hurried and worried, that we become less weary and less burdened, and where we let our souls rest in you. I pray these things in your name. Amen. I love you. Have a great week. I'll see you at least online next week.